VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on the VCY American Network. Ladies and gentlemen, increasingly there is a growing debate that's taking place in our country more than ever before on the matter of continuing to elect our president by means of the constitutionally directed electoral system, which we see in Article 2, Section 1 of our Constitution, or by the increasing push and pressure for something known as the national popular vote. These two come at a crossroads with one another. I mean, they're in conflict with one another, the Electoral College versus the national popular vote. And we're going to be talking about that issue today on Crosstalk. Perhaps you are unsure of what the electoral system is, why it is, how it operates, and why it was set up in this way. I trust you'll listen and glean the information that will be shared on the broadcast. To join us in the discussion, we have Trent England with us. He is the director of the Save Our States project with the Freedom Foundation. Trent, thank you so much for joining us on Crosstalk.
Oh, thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us about the Save Our States project. What is your purpose?
Well, sure thing. We, the Freedom Foundation is based in Washington State. We are one of a number of pro-free market, pro-limited government groups based in states around the country. And a few years back, we recognized that there was this fight brewing over the Electoral College. There were folks on the political left who had pledged millions and millions of dollars to try to get rid of the Electoral College. And, being a state-based group and a group that believes in limited constitutional government, this is a big concern for us because we have seen so much of this system of federalism, the system of states that our founders created, eroded over the last 100 years. And to have another really important part of federalism knocked out of the Constitution, I think would be a real tragedy and do real damage to our system of states and our Constitution. So we took this on. We created the Save Our States project to advocate for constitutional federalism generally, but really to focus in on this issue of the Electoral College, this debate over the national popular vote proposal. And I have been really blessed over the last several years to travel around to state capitals all around the country, meet with state legislators, and educate them about why the Electoral College is there, how it works, and why it's important.
And I think that's really a good foundation for us to get established here today, is to understand why it is our founders, those who framed our Constitution, established this electoral system, the Electoral College. Why did they do such a thing? What is the purpose of the electoral system? Why did they establish this?
Well, the Electoral College is really a challenging thing to study when you go back to the American founding, and I like it for that reason because it forces us to confront the fact that the American founders had some disagreements and they had some different ideas about how things worked, and they weren't always absolutely sure. They were brilliant, they were innovative, they were humble. Most of them were remarkably humble, at least, and the Electoral College came out of this compromise that created Congress. Of course, there were delegates to the Constitutional Convention who wanted a purely population-based system, which we have now in the House of Representatives, and there were delegates who wanted a purely state-based system, which we see in the U.S. Senate. And they compromised and created our bicameral Congress, our two-branch Congress that has both the House and the Senate. And when it came to figuring out how to elect the president, there was the same kind of disagreement, and really it was a real conundrum because they wanted someone to be the executive of the country, to both have the ability to act with energy. They talked about energy or vigor. This is the commander-in-chief, so they wanted someone who could effectively represent us in foreign affairs and lead the military, and at the same time they wanted that person bound down by the rule of law, and they didn't want another king. And so they talked through a lot of different ideas. But after they created Congress, they realized that was kind of a nice mathematical compromise that recognized both the importance of the sort of democratic idea of representing the population, and also the fact that we are organized in states, and states are very important in our system of government. They're called in the Federalist Papers a double security to the rights of the people, and so the Electoral College is based on that. Each state really holds its own election for president, and when we vote in our state, we're really electing a slate of presidential electors, and this is the founders basically gave this power to the states. They said the state legislatures can figure out how they want to do this, and today all of the states hold elections. Originally some did, some didn't. Of course, the first couple presidential elections were the only non-controversial presidential elections we've ever had, because everyone knew that George Washington was going to win, and pretty much everybody was very happy with that. But very quickly it developed into a system much like what we see today, where 48 states hold elections for their presidential electors, and whoever wins the most votes in that state gets those presidential electors. Nebraska and Maine do it a little bit differently, and states over our history have experimented with different ways to do this. They elect presidential electors by congressional district. And so in the last presidential election in 2008, Barack Obama lost the statewide vote in Nebraska, but he won the most votes in one of their congressional districts, and so he received one of Nebraska's electoral votes. So this is the system created by our founders. It doesn't work the way all of them thought that it would, but it protects these same interests and this system of states that is recognized in our whole Constitution, and most particularly in our Congress.
Yeah, and so as you mentioned, the Great Compromise, and this is really what drew things together, because we had big states and we had small states, and rather than be 13 rival colonies, it put them into a constitutional republic and allows these states, regardless of their size, to be all players in the process of who's going to be president.
Well, that's right, and it really, the idea was, let's keep most of the issues local, and let's just do those things at the national level that really have to be done there. Foreign affairs, national defense, preventing states from having trade wars with each other, or preventing states from starting wars with Indian tribes was a big concern at the time of the founding, and that's right. It's one of the sort of a side note, but it's important to remember. One of the reasons why politics has become so national and also so nasty is that we have politicized so many issues at the national level that it produces this sort of vitriol and polarization that we see today. The more we can get back to the founders' original design of pushing most issues down to the most local level, at least in the states, if not, in our counties and in our cities and towns, the more we do that, I think the less nasty politics we will see. But unfortunately, a lot of things have moved the other direction towards Washington, D.C. Over the last 100 years. And if we lose the Electoral College, it just pushes even more power to Washington, D.C., which I think would be a real tragedy.
Trent England is with us here today from the Save Our States Project. And Trent, there is a movement that has been started called the National Popular Vote. What are they seeking to do?
Well, this is a group based in California, and it was started actually by someone who was one of California's electors in 2000. He was an elector for Al Gore in the 2000 election. His name's John Koza. He's a brilliant computer scientist based in California, and he looked around and he wanted to get rid of the Electoral College after the 2000 election, and he's a smart man, and so he realized amending the Constitution is really, really hard, and people have actually tried to get rid of the Electoral College by amending the Constitution, and they came relatively close back over 30 years ago. But it's tough. It requires supermajorities in Congress and then ratification by the states. He wanted an easier way to change this constitutional process, and he created what is called National Popular Vote, and they have an organization. They have about $40 million pledged behind this effort. National Popular Vote is an interstate compact. It's an agreement among the states who pass this legislation. And what it says, we can get into the constitutional questions about whether this is legal, whether it's enforceable, but what they claim to do is that as states adopt this, if enough states adopted it, it would go into effect, and all of the states that adopt National Popular Vote would ignore how the people vote in their own state. And they will look at the national popular vote total, and they'll award their electoral votes to whoever wins the most votes nationwide. And what this would do, it allows them to create a national popular vote, but to use the constitutional electoral college process, sort of to hijack that process and to create a national popular vote. It's very clever. I mean, you have to give these guys credit as tacticians. It's a very clever way to try to do away with the Electoral College without doing away with the Electoral College apparatus, which requires constitutional change.
Yeah, and the people at National Popular Vote will say, hey, we're not trying to do away with the Electoral College. We're not changing the Constitution. But in my opinion, Trent, what they're seeking to do is really to subvert the Constitution by going state to state to change how the electors in that state are directed to vote.
Well, there are a lot of nice people there and all that, but it's really disingenuous. I mean, the motivation behind National Popular Vote is to get rid of this Electoral College state by state way of electing the president. I mean, there's no two ways about it, and the more honest people who are interested in this idea will admit that, this is, I've actually met a fair number of people who will admit that it's not a great way to do it, but maybe if they could get enough states to pass it, it would force constitutional change. It would force Congress to pass out a constitutional amendment because it would create so much uncertainty and concern.
Yeah, let me give this scenario because this really puts it down for us, easy to grasp, the cookies off the shelf here. If a majority of people in my state, the state of Wisconsin, where I'm doing this program from, if the majority of people in my state voted for one particular candidate, however, the national popular vote showed that the other candidate was favored, we, as a state of Wisconsin, would be forced to give our electoral votes not to the person our people voted for in the state of Wisconsin, but to the candidate that others favored because nationwide they had more people backing them. I mean, to me, that's being disenfranchised to the very max.
Well, I think that's right. And to take an even more extreme example, and it sounds extreme today, but in light of American history, not so much really, a state could, Wisconsin could be forced to give your electoral votes to a candidate who wasn't even on the ballot in Wisconsin, who didn't qualify for the ballot there or who didn't campaign there at all. And in that case, the candidate would be able to choose Wisconsin's electors. They wouldn't even have to be people from Wisconsin. And so it really could cut states completely out of the process in some extreme cases. And one of the things we have to recognize, and this is a really tough point for folks. As I said, I talked to a lot of state legislators, and they're in politics up to their eyeballs, and it's still hard for them to recognize how much the Electoral College has shaped our politics over time. We got to take a break here, Trent, but we'll pick it up here on the other side. We're speaking today with Trent England from the Save Our States Project, the Electoral College versus the National Popular Vote. We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what's the scientific definition of a miracle?
Chris, interesting question. I guess the best answer we have is that a miracle is scientifically impossible, but it happened anyway. You see, when God created the universe, He was using processes which are not operating today. He was creating things and winding things up. Today we see nothing being created, but we do see things winding down as far as their complexity goes. Scientifically speaking, whenever someone stands in water, they sink. To walk on water is a violation of the natural law of gravity. It scientifically can't happen, but it did happen when Christ walked on the water. The same could be said for turning water into wine or multiplying the bread and loaves. Above all, Christ's resurrection from the dead was a violation of natural law, as was, of course, the creation itself. But it happened just the same. back in Genesis.
For more information, call 1-800-7-GENESIS.
The Constitutional Electoral College versus the National Popular Vote. We're speaking today with Trent England, who is the director of the Save Our States project with the Freedom Foundation, and talking about the controversy between these two ideals. And Trent, just as that break was coming upon us, you were moving toward a point, but we needed to interrupt you there for just a moment, so we'll have you pick up where you left off.
Well, the point is, and this is important for anybody thinking about politics, is that it's not a zero-sum game, or it's not. You can't flip one switch without affecting a lot of other things, right? And this, again, gets back to the genius of the American founders, because they understood that incentives matter and institutions matter and processes. And the Electoral College creates a powerful set of incentives to having a much more national politics than you would otherwise need to have. You know, you think about the United States, we are remarkably diverse by all sorts of different measures, right? I mean, geographically, the resources that we have are different climates, you know, from deserts to mountains. You know, out here in the Pacific Northwest where I am, it's a very different place than, say, in Oklahoma, where I was a couple of weeks ago, and all those things matter in politics, and you need a way to pull people together. And the Electoral College actually forces all of our national politics, our national political parties, and our national campaigns, and I think it trickles down to be much more national than they would otherwise have to be. And you can see this really obviously after the Civil War. If people have studied that era in history, there was this powerful force for the Democratic Party in particular that was really strong in the Deep South to nominate candidates from the North and to focus all of their outreach in the North. They had to return to being a kind of national coalition, or they would never win the White House again because of the Electoral College, and that was on display in the 1880s and 1890s. You know, people say, well, we could get rid of the Electoral College and go to a national popular vote. We don't have to worry about regional politics because we don't have regional politics. Well, the question is why, and the answer is the Electoral College. And you know, you're stuck in that loop. We really have to think about the incentives created by the process. And I think the founders, if they were here today and were able to look at the Electoral College and the results of that process, I actually think that they would be surprised at some of how it works. I think they'd be pleasantly surprised. I think that it actually works better than they expected. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the national popular vote is really fraught with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk. And my biggest frustration with the folks who support it is that they're not really that interested in trying to figure out what those risks are or even that honest about what the uncertainty is, and there's a lot of uncertainty there.
Well, one of the things that the Electoral College does do, it requires those running for president to gear their time, their resources, their policies for the whole country and not just for the populous states. For instance, I was looking here. I just called up the population of the United States. California has a population of about just over 37 million people. And when I compared that to the smaller states, it takes just over 21 states combined to equal California's population. Wyoming, Vermont, North Dakota, Alaska, South Dakota, Delaware, Montana, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, Hawaii, Idaho, Nebraska, West Virginia, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, Kansas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Iowa, all combined, their population is still less than the head of the state of California. Yeah. And so basically you would only need a politician to go to California and say, if you elect me as your president, I am going to, you know, give this amount of money. We're going to fund this in your state for the, and all the people, yeah, we want that. And then you've got this one populous state that's going to get all these little gems and jewels and leave everybody else, you know, coughing in the dust.
Well, and I mean, that's exactly right. Presidential elections are really a two-stage process when you think about them geographically. And the first stage, during the nomination process, one of the realities, and this even goes back before candidates start to run, because it's a reality for the political parties, is that you have to have broad geographic support. You have to have a broad geographic base, right? A political party would be incredibly foolish to nominate someone who had, who drew all of their support from California and a handful of other western states, or from just the most populous states, because that might be a huge base. It might be a big fundraising base, but in the end, you would never win the presidency that way, because you have to win not just the most popular votes, but you have to reach this electoral college victory, which is a higher standard. Mm-hmm. And so you start out needing a broad geographic base, and then as the campaign progresses, this is where a lot of people get frustrated, and it's where National Popular Vote focuses their criticism. The campaign moves toward swing states at the end. And, the first point is, of course, the candidates they have a broad geographic base, right? I mean, the swing states are the states that are very, very close, mm-hmm. And all the other states matter. I mean, to say that the other states don't matter is really to not see the forest for the trees. But what is a swing state? A swing state is a state that is very, very closely politically divided. The Electoral College drives our candidates and our focus not to the polar extremes, not to the states that are 80-20, one side or the other. It drives our politics to the states that are 50-50. And as frustrating as that can be, I think it's much healthier than if, the Democrat strategy was, let's crank as many votes out of Chicago and Los Angeles and New York as we possibly can, and the Republicans, let's crank as many votes out of our strongest locations, maybe in Texas. Where we've seen that in the past, I mean, that's dangerous. It's very tempting for people to commit vote fraud in places where they have one-party control. It's much healthier to drive toward the places that are 50-50 and have candidates making their case to these evenly divided states. As I said, it frustrates some people. I've told a lot of people over the years, the Electoral College, it may well be simply the least bad way, to elect the president. But the problem is, you go to a national popular vote system, and it allows candidates to run much more to the extremes, and it increases the potential for election fraud, because it would allow these states where there's essentially one-party control to determine the outcome of an election. That is not a good thing.
Trent, what would it do to the recount process? I mean, we saw back a few elections ago one state, the state of Florida, in which we waited weeks on end to determine whether the Chad was hanging or not, and waiting for that vote, which we saw ultimately the electoral votes then went for George W. Bush. What would this do, though, if we're talking about if we were at a national popular vote? Wouldn't this recount and calls for recounts be just almost universal across every state, trying to muster up another 100 votes, another 1,000 votes here, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that's exactly right. This brings back memories of my testifying in the Wisconsin legislature when the National Popular Vote bill came up a few years ago, because I went round and round with the bill sponsor on this issue of recounts, and she made the National Popular Vote argument, which is that National Popular Vote is good because it leaves all the state recount processes in place. It doesn't interfere with them at all. The problem with that is it doesn't make any sense, because if you're going to have a National Popular Vote, if you're looking at the national vote total, then the individual state recount laws and standards don't make any sense, right? I mean, what you're interested in is the national result, and you can't have a close national election where California or Illinois says, well, it's really close, so we're going to recount our ballots here. If other states don't do that, obviously that creates a fairness problem, and in constitutional law we call that an equal protection problem. It it would really require, in the end, that you centralize election processes.
Mm-hmm.
But national popular vote, because of this clever state-by-state, interstate compact method that they have chosen, they can't actually do that. And this is one of those areas where really they would just create a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and they don't offer a process for national recounts, but they create the necessity.
And in our day and age, they definitely would happen.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. The national popular vote is boasting a number of states that have already passed legislation to enact this. They mentioned Vermont, Maryland, Washington, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, Hawaii, and Washington, D.C. They are saying that they've enacted this by states that possess 132 electoral votes, which is 49% of the 270 electoral votes needed to activate it. Is this concerning to you?
It is. It absolutely is. The reality, on the one hand, is that they are almost halfway to the number of states that control a presidential election, and their measure would go into effect if they got to the halfway point, 270 electoral votes, and it would control, arguably it would control the outcome of presidential elections. In reality, it would lead to massive litigation and uncertainty. That's a tremendous concern. On the other hand, this year, 2012, is the first year when national popular vote has not gained an additional state, and they actually, because of reapportionment, because every 10 years we have a census, and the number of congressional of members of Congress allocated to each state change based on population changes, they actually lost just slightly because some of their states lost electoral votes. They lost a couple. Most of your listeners probably recognize when you read off a list like Vermont, Maryland, Illinois, etc., those are our deepest blue states in the United States. They're very, very liberal states.
Are there red states going this direction?
No, they have. National popular vote has spent a tremendous amount of money lobbying in red states, and they've had temporary success. What I've found is that as long as the Save Our States project is able to go into those states and educate legislators and really just, it's not a lobbying process for us. It's really just an education process to help state legislators understand why the Electoral College is important, what national popular vote would really do. We have had, as happened in Wisconsin, we have had a lot of people who originally co-sponsored the bill because they were lobbied so heavily, completely turn around, take their names off national popular votes legislation, reject the bill, vote against it, and we've seen just tremendous success. Wisconsin, Maine, South Carolina, Utah, a lot of states targeted by national popular vote. Alaska is another one. States where they briefly had a lot of bipartisan support, and as soon as you just walk state legislators through the reality here, we've seen great success. And I think that national popular vote is going to spend millions of dollars next year to make their argument in state legislatures around the country.
Folks, we get a break coming up here, but folks, the question is, what can you do about it? We're going to take this break and come back. We're going to ask that question of our guests to know how you can get involved in this process, how you can get better informed, and how you can engage yourself in this debate. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Is America on a collision course with God? In the book, As America Has Done to Israel, author John McTernan indicates there is a direct correlation between the alarming number of massive disasters striking America and our leaders pressuring Israel to surrender her land for peace. Costing hundreds of lives and causing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage, dozens of disasters, including devastating earthquakes, raging fires, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes, have hit America, and always within just a short time after putting pressure on Israel. The book not only points out the correlation to these events, but also gives guidance as to what you can do as an individual and what America can do to change the direction of our country in relation to Israel. Copies of the book As America Has Done to Israel are available for a donation of $17 or more to VCY America and can be obtained by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
We're speaking today with Trent England, director of the Save Our States Project with the Freedom Foundation, and we're talking on the topic Electoral College versus National Popular Vote. A lot of information has been laid here on the program regarding the Electoral College, why it was set up, how it works. But Trent, you have got, we've really scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn on this issue, and tell our listeners what they can do about it. I mean, sometimes we sit back and we say, I'm helpless, I'm just one individual. What can I do? Is my state at risk? How do I inform my legislators? What advice do you have?
Well, this is a great issue because so many of us we love this country. We venerate the accomplishment of our founders and our Constitution, and this issue gets right to that. It takes us right to the Constitution, right to this issue of federalism, the importance of our states, and so first of all, I want to encourage people to. This isn't just an electoral college, sort of a technical elections issue. This goes right to the heart of our understanding that we are a republic with a constitution. We're not simply a democracy where it's the old saw, two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. We believe in the rule of law, and we believe in constitutional processes. And this is a great issue to get involved in because it's at the state legislative level, which means it's right in your state capital, and it's not an issue that most state legislators have taken a strong position on. So you can actually persuade them. We were talking before the break. I've seen people who co-sponsored this legislation, Democrats and Republicans, who you talk to them, you talk them through the issue, and they spin completely around, and they suddenly they realize how important this is.
The light pops on.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so, our website is saveourstates.com. We have a lot of information there. We track this issue, particularly as state legislatures are coming back into session in January. We're on Twitter, we are on Facebook. We try to push out as much information as we can to help people know what's going on in your state and have all of the information you need to educate the people around you and especially your state legislators. And we also rely on people on Facebook or Twitter or by email or just calling my office at the Freedom Foundation to let us know what's going on in your state. Because, Wisconsin, the first time, someone called us and I hopped on a plane that night and went out there because we're able to do that. And we take this very seriously, and I'd love to come out and help people to educate their communities and their legislators on this issue. So saveourstates.com, our contact information is there, lots of information. You can find Save Our States on Facebook, and I'd love to connect with people who love our Constitution and this amazing system that we have had bequeathed to us, and that we really we have to pass this on to our children. It's our obligation.
And there's a number of folk that don't have immediate internet access. You have a contact phone number for your organization?
Absolutely. The phone number for the Freedom Foundation is 360-956-3482, or I guess I probably should give out our 800 number because I know that's long distance. And I will look for that, and I will tell you that later in the program because I don't have that right in front of me.
Again, folks, that's the website is saveourstates.com, saveourstates.com. And the dial direct number, 360-956-3482.
Well, and here's our 800 number. Sorry about that, Jim. Our 800 number at the Freedom Foundation is 800-769-6617. And anyone who needs information on this issue, we'd be happy to help. And it's a great time to be talking to people about this because we have a presidential election going on. There's a lot of interest in this.
1-800-769-6617. Are there any other states that are at immediate risk of going this direction?
New York is really a state that has teetered on the edge for about 4 years, and it's also a state that is a little bit tougher to get through to state legislators in, frankly, because it's a big state with a lot of political turmoil
and a lot of electoral votes.
That's right. And so, yeah, New York is very important. There have been efforts in New Jersey and Maryland and Washington State to repeal national popular vote. And obviously those are important efforts in those states in particular to try to repeal this and to make the argument against it. Other states that have been targeted, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, surprisingly, has been targeted by national popular vote. But they have their resource level is so big on their side that they have lobbyists in almost every state where this has not passed. So it's important for people to keep their eyes out.
Well, folks, let's open our phone lines. If you have questions that you'd like to ask about this matter or perhaps a comment to make, that is the Electoral College versus national popular vote. Our telephone number here to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. And I don't know if it's you, Trent, or who came up with the analogy, but someone has likened this whole controversy that's taking place to, like the National World Series in baseball. We have teams that play 7 games for the championship, and right now we award to whoever wins, the first one to get 4 games. But with the national popular vote contest, it would be like, why don't we just deem the winner to be the one who scored the most runs in all 7 games combined, and that would be the winner of the World Series?
That's right. I mean, and you can think about that in all sorts of different sports contexts, mm-hmm. right? You have a set of rules, and if you hold to those rules, and if they are, if they're not rules that in some substantive way actually tip the balance one direction or the other, then as long as you stick to them, they're a fair set of rules. And then the question is, does it lead to a better or worse outcome and better or worse incentives? And I think the World Series analogy is great because we don't. You see World Series where the losing team actually scores more runs overall, but that's not the rules, mm-hmm. and there's reasons why we award it to whoever wins 4 games. No, that's exactly right. And
let's go to the phone lines. By the way, again, folks, our number 800-733-9829. We have Rick calling from Navarre, Florida. Rick, you're on the air.
Yes, great program, gentlemen, and a very substantive topic. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned in terms of the rationale that the Founding Fathers had for establishing the Electoral College was documented in Federalist 68 by Hamilton, March 14, 1788. And over 224 years of history, Mr. Hamilton has almost providential prescience. Let me read a couple of sentences because this is very pertinent to our time. This is Hamilton from Federalist 68, specifically speaking about the Electoral College and the reason for its establishment. Quoting now, okay, nothing was more to be desired than that every practicable obstacle should be opposed to cabal, intrigue, and corruption. These most deadly adversaries of Republican government might naturally have been expected to make their approaches from more than one quarter, but chiefly from the desire in foreign powers to gain an improper ascendancy in our councils. How could they better gratify this than by raising a creature of their own to the chief magistracy of the Union? But the convention have guarded against all dangers of this sort with the most provident and judicious attention, end quote. And the convention he's referring to, of course, was the Constitutional Convention. So here we have, across 224 years of history, evidence that the Founding Fathers were primarily worried. You'll notice Hamilton said nothing was to be more desired, was to prevent a foreign creature from gaining ascendancy. And apparently that didn't work because sadly, not only is the Electoral College being abused and in danger of being written out of existence, but the people who are appointed as electors are usually political functionaries who basically vote by rote and do what they're told. So we no longer have a really independent Electoral College as the Founding Fathers envisioned.
Okay. Your comment here, Trent?
Well, there's really two important issues that are raised there, and the last one is really interesting because it's true that the founders thought that they were creating in the Electoral College a body that would have some deliberative capacity, and they would actually get together and they would decide who they wanted to cast their electoral votes for. There are some reasons why that didn't work out, and chief among them is that if that actually was the way things worked, most often you wouldn't have an electoral college majority, and it would throw the election to the House of Representatives. And the founders also thought that would happen quite a bit more than it has over our history. But the reality there is that people don't want to hand over their power. That would hand over a lot of power to the House of Representatives, and so political parties figured out how to run the process in a way that has turned out to be a lot more democratic, where, yes, the electors, they go with whoever wins the most votes in their state. And it's important to see that process, too. I think people who participate in their own state political party conventions understand this, and almost nobody else does because it's somewhat obscure. But the parties each nominate a slate of electors, and those people are elected on Election Day as your state's electors based on who wins the most votes for president in your state. So there is a process there, and it does reflect the political will of your state. The other side of that, the issue of cabal and intrigue that Hamilton talks about in Federalist 68 is, that's absolutely correct. They wanted a two-stage process to elect the President of the United States, I think sort of somewhat regardless of how the Electoral College operates at the level of detail. It's a two-stage process that the founders believed, and I think this is largely true, tends to distill out higher quality and more moderate candidates than you would get in a direct popular vote. I think that's true. It's hard to measure, though, because obviously you don't have a what scientists would call a control group. You don't. Most countries actually don't have a direct popular election for their chief executive. A lot of countries are parliamentary, which is a different system entirely. But no, those are important points to make. And Federalist 68 is like the rest of the Federalist Papers, is good reading.
Rick, we appreciate your call here today. Thanks so much. To Mike in Bayview, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Jim and Trent. I love this country so much, and I just can't understand why, I can get the Electoral College thing and all of that, but, if there's anywhere for corruption to happen, it seems like the Democrats nowadays are going to do it. I mean, if they can dig people up out of their grave to have them vote, or if they can have your dead dog to vote, I'm sitting here just banging my head against the wall trying to figure out why can't we do it like they did it in Saudi Arabia, where they got to put ink on their finger and put their fingerprint down on the paper so they only get one vote, let it wash off in a week, I mean, we've got to try to straighten something out, and this vote is what's going to be corrupted, and I just hope we can figure something out.
Mike, thank you for your call here, and that's one of the things our guest alluded to, was the fact that fraud and corruption is something that the opportunities are heightened with a national popular vote. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk here on the VCY American Network, taking your calls at 800-733-9829.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. Continuing on our series of what is real spiritual warfare, we've learned from 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5, Ephesians 6, 17, that real spiritual warfare is not railing at demons, but it is battling for the hearts of men and women, boys and girls, by destroying arguments raised up against the principles of the Lord, proclaiming the gospel, biblical truth. John MacArthur writes, Christians who verbally confront demons waste energy and demonstrate ignorance of the real war. We are not called to convert demons, but sinners. The battle is rather with the false ideologies men and demons propagate so that the world believes them. Paul further defines sinners' strongholds of ideas as every lofty thing that is, any biblical system of thought, exalted as truth, that is raised up against the knowledge of God. There is the key. Spiritual warfare is not a battle with demons. It is a battle for the minds of people who are captive to the lies that are exalted in opposition to the Scripture. For Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House.
Trent England is our guest today. He is the director of the Save Our States Project, and their website is saveourstates.com, saveourstates.com. Their toll-free number, 800-769-6617, for more information on the matter of the Electoral College versus the national popular vote. Our next caller is from West Dallas, and Brad, you're on the air.
Hi, Jim. What I find particularly damning about this entire thing is that your guest's organization has to go about educating people who are already in positions of power. Why don't they know this already? They should know this like the back of their hand, and they should know one thing else. The side that wants this to go through, that should be enough reason to turn it down altogether, because they're trying to muck up the works for their own benefit.
Brad, thanks for the point. Is it kind of disappointing to you, Trent, that you're having to educate legislators on this? I mean, one would assume legislators kind of know the Electoral College system and why it was set up?
Well, yes and no. I mean, certainly it is disappointing to a certain degree. I think, there are a couple of realities. One is that the people in our state legislatures were educated in the same schools over the last 50 or so years as everybody else, and we know that the teaching about the American founding, about our Constitution, has really faded away. Perhaps it's faded away at best, and at worst, it's taught in a way that's just really an attack on those things, on our Constitution. And so it's not surprising. And, it's one of the other costs of big government. As we make government bigger, as we give government more power, our legislators, our members of Congress, everyone in that system knows less and less about what they're expected to be in charge of. And so I think one of the costs of big government is that we're less represented, and the people who we elect to represent us know a lot less about what they're doing. It's one of the reasons I believe in limiting government power, just in general, because the bigger government gets, the less representative it is. But we have to take the world as it is, and we have to win this battle. And so I am happy to go out and do as much education as I can on the issue of the Electoral College.
Let's go to Port Charlotte, Florida. Robert, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question. Is it possible to win the popular vote and still lose in the Electoral College?
Yes. Yes, it's happened arguably 4 times, probably really 3 times in our history, and it happens. A lot of people probably remember the 2000 county-by-county presidential election map that showed that Al Gore, he won his slight popular vote majority from basically the big cities and Indian reservations. That was, if you look at that map, he had very intense support in urban areas and not much support around the country, or the election of 1888 where Grover Cleveland won the most popular votes but lost the Electoral College. He had really hyper-intense support in the Deep South, but he lost most of the northern and border states by smaller margins than he won in the South, so he got the most popular votes but lost the presidency.
Is that why they're trying to get rid of the Electoral College?
Yeah, that's their argument. It's undemocratic, and because that can happen.
So a man could be the popular person but still lose.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Grover Cleveland, who was the sitting president, lost re-election that way, although he came back 4 years later to win, and Al Gore lost that way.
And that's where the protection to the states comes in. Appreciate the call here, Robert. Thank you. Let's see, one more call. Jerry in Nebraska, you're on the air.
Hi. Why don't we do it the way Nebraska does it nationwide? You mentioned Nebraska earlier. I live in Nebraska, and you explained it very simply that the popular vote determines the Electoral College winner based on congressional districts, correct?
That's right. I think this is where the genius of the Electoral College and the Constitution comes in, because it allows states to decide on their own how they want to do it. And the Nebraska and Maine method works, I think, very well for Nebraska and Maine. I think it would work well for some other states. But when you get to the really big states, it would have the problem of focusing all the attention in, say, California around a very small number of congressional districts that are extremely compact because California's population is so urbanized.
Yet, with how many districts? I think you said 27 electoral votes. Is that correct?
In California is 55.
That would certainly, that many. That would certainly dilute that possibility of outweighing that count you gave earlier of 27 other states to make 59 electoral votes. Mm-hmm. That sounded intriguing to me as a way of diluting that chance of giving California more favor. One more thing, and then I'll listen to your comments off the air. Nebraska is one of the few states, maybe the only one now, that has a unicameral legislature. No Republicans, no Democrats, in the sense of a House of Representatives and a Senate. We do everything with a unicameral, nonpartisan. It's been working pretty good.
Okay. Thank you for your comments there. And this concept here, when we take a look here, the population, just so we were talking electoral votes of California versus all these other states, that was population-wise. But we've got about 30 or 60 seconds left in the program here, and let me have you, Trent, sum up whatever thoughts you'd like to share here in the final minute.
Absolutely. Well, the last caller made a great point, which is that our states are different, right? Nebraska is particularly different in their constitutional structure. That is part of the genius, right? It's not just that we are united, it's that we have states, and those states were designed in the constitutional system to be, as James Madison said, a double security to the rights of the people. The Electoral College is a key part of this state-by-state process that we have in our Constitution. It's a state-by-state way to elect the President of the United States. The Electoral College is really important. It gives the power to the states, to the people as organized in our states, and we should try to keep it that way. The national popular vote would wipe all of that away, create huge uncertainty, really guarantee litigation. So, saveourstates.com for more information. We'd love to help people wherever they are to educate those around them.
Again, folks, at saveourstates.com. Their toll-free number 800-769-6617. You can contact them for more information here on this Electoral College versus the national popular vote. Trent, thanks for carving some time out to join us today.
Thanks so much, Jim.
And folks, thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.